Welcome to Unfiltered IEPs, where parents and professionals can speak freely about their own IEP experiences, both the little victories and major frustrations. I want you to hear the unfiltered version of what it's really like to be on the other side of the table. I'm your host, Colleen, the Advocate SLP, and my hope is that by facilitating conversations that are authentic and honest, we will cut through to the heart of the issues and understand both each other and the system a little better. So if you've ever found yourself thinking, they just don't get it after an IEP meeting, this podcast is for you, so stay tuned. And although I'm a speech-language pathologist and non-attorney advocate, nothing said on this pod should be taken as medical or legal advice. Experiences shared on the podcast are only the personal experiences of my guests and I for entertainment purposes only. Thanks for tuning in. Hi, Unfiltered listeners. If you're a school-based SLP, teacher, or related service provider, I want to tell you about something I created specifically for you. It's called The Guide to Becoming an Advocate on the Inside. This 22-page guide is for educators working within the public school system. It's for those moments when you know a student needs more support, you have the data, and you're trying to figure out how to say it clearly and professionally at the IEP table. It's not about being louder or confrontational. It's about being more intentional with how you advocate, so your recommendations are grounded, ethical, and aligned with your role. Because advocating from the inside takes skill, not just good intentions. I spent half my career as a school-based SLP, so I know what it's like to care deeply about your students while balancing caseloads, administrative pressure, and unspoken rules at the IEP table. You tell yourself, this time I'll speak up more. But you're up against, this is how we've always done it, the fear of being labeled difficult, and the quiet isolation of seeing the issue but not knowing how to name it. That's why I created this guide. It's practical, values-driven, and designed to help you advocate clearly, ethically, and strategically. Inside, you'll find mindset shifts that help you change the tone of your meetings, over 30 practical scripts, and concrete ways to speak up with confidence, even when it's uncomfortable. You're already advocating. This helps you do it with intention, skill, and sustainability. You can purchase the guide to becoming an advocate on the inside using the link below, and if you use the code UNFILTERED, you'll get an additional 10% off the already low price of $25. All right, welcome to the Unfiltered IEPs podcast. Let's start with introductions like we do at every IEP meeting. I'm your host, Colleen, the Advocate SLP, if you follow me on Instagram. And today I'm joined by Gail, my wonderful friend, former CODA, current occupational therapist, and previous coworker. Welcome, Gail. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you.
Gail, you've worked in and had field work in a variety of settings, from hospitals to non-public schools, clinics, public schools. Now you're doing early intervention. I feel like the last couple of years of our career kind of like mirrored each other in a way.
A lot.
We both had our like clinic, then school, then early intervention time. And you've been the co-host of my disability representation in media group that we held earlier this year. And then going way back to when we were in the clinic together, hosting some autism parent support groups that were kind of book clubs. We've done some fun stuff together. So I knew you would be like the perfect guest. Not only can you speak to what it's like to be on the school team, but also you can speak to what it is like to be a parent at the IEP table. And I think that depth and breadth of experience like is really going to be great for listeners, because you can see from both sides like what it feels like truly, and then like where the communication breakdowns happen. Would you agree with that?
Yes, totally. I'm in that unique position of having been on both sides of the table. So I understand the desire of parents to just want what's best for their kids, but also on the school side, understanding kind of what our limitations are. You know, I have that unique perspective of understanding both sides.
Can you go into a little bit more detail for us about what like the journey of your occupational therapy career looked like?
Oh my gosh. Starting way back from after I graduated from high school, I had no idea what OT was. OT was not ever anything I had ever heard of, didn't have that experience. I just knew that I wanted to work with kids with disabilities, but I didn't want to be a teacher. I knew I wanted to help them kind of learn how to do their day-to-day activities. But I had no idea what OT was. The dating myself here, the internet was not what it is now, so I couldn't research as much, and I didn't have as much guidance in school. So I totally went, out of left field, was an interior design major. And then I ended up getting laid off and stumbled upon looking for jobs through Radies. And I came across an opening for an occupational therapist. And I thought, what is that? So I Googled it and realized, that's what I've been looking for. That's what I wanted to do. But at the time, I had 2 little kids, and so I was just trying to look for a quick way to get into the profession. So I found, an associate's program for an occupational therapy assistant position. So fast forward, I actually ended up having 3 kids by the time I graduated from that program. Went really well. I got a job right away from another clinic that you and I both worked for. And just a series of just bad luck kind of happened. Like, I got laid off because insurance is very picky about who they want to cover.
Right.
And
that's right. As a CODA, they
Yes.
weren't wanting to cover your services anymore.
Right. And, long story short, there was a series of layoffs. I kept getting jobs, and then things would happen. The last CODA job that I had, CODA, for anyone that doesn't know, is Certified Occupational Therapy Assistant. The last job I had was in a clinic, and then COVID hit. So I got laid off again. And then I found myself also having to juggle kids at home. So I was fortunate enough that I found a bridge program that I was able to do. It was a hybrid program that I was able to do partly from home and partly on campus. So I like to say, no commute is crazier than what I did because I flew from San Diego to Florida once a month. 3 kids, husband, and I couldn't have done it without the support system that I have. But it was a crazy time, and I look back and I can't believe I did it.
I know. We celebrated when that was over, man. That was crazy.
Yes, but I did, and I could not believe that I did it. But here I am, and my whole journey has been in pediatrics. I did have one short stint in the hospital.
I think that your story is really inspiring for the non-traditional students out there, and the ones who start after they've begun their motherhood journey, or making that transition from CODA to OT. And you're proof, man. You can do it. That non-traditional program was intense.
Yes.
Now you're out here, fully fledged licensed occupational therapist.
Yes.
Taking on the world. That I just love that story. So tell me a little bit about your current role in early intervention and how it differs from the other roles in the school and the clinic, because I have my own thoughts on this, but I've been wanting to talk to you about this for a while anyway, so I want to hear your take.
So it's interesting because the interactions I've had with parents and the kind of how parents perceive you in the different settings is so interesting. I find that in the schools, a lot of parents did not have a lot of respect for the therapists in the schools. Mm-hmm. Just like I think sometimes they look down on the teaching profession. Not all parents, obviously, but we tend to. There are some perspectives where teaching is not the highest respected
in our country, right?
Yes, and I feel like that trickled down to a therapist, and and then in the clinic, I was seen as more of a doctor, and you had a little bit more respect from parents and families, and now in the homes, sometimes I get called teacher by the parents. They refer to me as teacher to their kids,
and I don't mind it at all.
No, and I don't either.
Some people really, really don't like it, but they're saying it in Spanish most of the time to me, maestra, and I know that in their culture, teaching is revered. So it's a compliment to me.
Now that I think about it, it is more of my Hispanic families that do call me that. I have been called doctor also. And so, and whatever they want to call me, it's fine. But I do enjoy it because I feel like parents are more comfortable. They're in their environment. They're comfortable with talking to me about everything, their day-to-day life, their whatever they're struggling with throughout the day, their things to be celebrated, things that they're having a hard time with. They're a lot more comfortable talking to me about it in the home, and I think we feel a lot less pressure than even in the clinics, because in the clinic it's like, okay, we have 10 minutes, we got to go to the next kid, right? Yeah. And even though that can be true in the home setting also, it's a little easier to adjust, and you can talk through the whole session with the family. And I feel like it's just a more well-rounded way of doing therapy.
Yeah. I love EI for that reason as well, because I've always just loved the parent connection.
Yeah.
One of our previous bosses used to say, like, you really are treating the family, like, not the kid. And that's so true, especially in early intervention and when you do outpatient therapy, I think the right way. But I think it's quite a cliff that families fall off when their child turns 3 and they continue to qualify for IDEA, special education services at the school. And it's just a completely different model, and it's a completely different experience. I think if we don't prep them, like, it does do them a disservice, because they start to get frustrated with the lack of communication, perceived lack of communication. And, it's a building they're sending their child into. And a lot of times at 3, if they're qualifying for special education, their communication is not typical, and they're not able to always tell their parents how their school day went. So the parents are really wanting more communication, and from the school perspective, having been in that position myself as a preschool SLP, we do our best to communicate, but it's not possible to do it with every parent every day. Right. And so that drop off is something I'm really trying to, like, prep parents for, so that they feel prepared to continue to support their child by leading those conversations with the school staff and having an expectation of how it's going to be a little bit different. I don't know if you've had any kids, hit that 3-year milestone yet or age out, but
no, I haven't.
Those are conversations that I think more of us have to have as EI therapists.
I haven't gotten there yet. I do have some coming up in the next few months, but it just dawned on me. It may be also different for OTs in speech, because in OT, the goals that I work on in early intervention may not translate or transfer over to the schools, because what am I working on? I'm working on picky eating. I'm working on dressing goals, things like that, sensory goals, things that do not transfer over to the schools because they're not education based.
Yes, let's talk about that more. But first, can you give me your spiel of how you would explain occupational therapy to a new early intervention family who's not totally clear on what your role is? Because I know that happens to me too, where they're like, what teacher are you? How do you explain it?
I get PT a lot. And I get families who are like, wait, I thought we were working on them being able to walk or crawl or, and we do work on that a little bit, depending on what the case is. But the way I explain it is, an occupational therapist works on occupations. What are occupations? Occupations are the things that we do that occupy our time throughout the day. For a kid, that's play, eating, sleeping, maybe dressing. As they get a little bit older, maybe some writing and pre-writing skills for our 3-year-olds. But that's kind of my general explanation of what an occupation is. Mm-hmm. And so as an occupational therapist, I look at where the breakdown is. I look at what skills the child maybe doesn't have yet to be able to complete those activities. So for example, I have kids who are working on eating with utensils. And so I break it down. Well, what's going on? They can't hold the spoon. So if we can't grasp things, we can't hold the spoon, we can't bring it up to our mouth. So we take
Yeah.
it further, a couple steps back and work on those foundational skills.
Of the
And that's what the
grasp.
OT does.
And so then if you were to explain to a parent who's going to turn 3 how school OT differs from what you're doing now, what would you say to them?
So the occupation that we focus on in the school setting is anything having to do with learning, right? So, you know, dressing isn't necessarily going to be something that's going to affect their education. So then we look at what are they struggling with? We get a lot of handwriting. That's kind of what the majority of the goals are in schools, I would say, is handwriting, and also sitting still in the classroom. So then we look at what are their sensory needs, what are, what's going on, and what's happening in the classroom that the student is not able to sit and attend to the lesson.
And also,
so, yeah.
I think a big thing that I see school OTs doing is less about the therapeutic intervention and more about the accommodations
Yes.
and educating the teacher on how to use them and how to support the student. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and and that goes with the parents also.
Yeah.
Sometimes they want us to fix these skills. Like I always use handwriting as an example because that's what we get presented with the most. All the concerns seem to be around handwriting. And I like to tell people we're not handwriting teachers. That's not the only thing OTs do. And unfortunately, if the student's writing is legible, it might not be the prettiest, but if it's legible, it's not causing them pain to write. It's not something that necessarily needs to be worked on because it's functional for that student. However, I have parents who their student is 11, 12, 13 years old, and you still can't read their handwriting, and they want more OT. They think more OT is going to help them. And I have to explain to them that, at this stage, actually, we don't typically like to work on handwriting anymore past second or third grade unless the student is motivated themselves to really work on that handwriting. It's just not effective past that point. And so that's when we kind of look to accommodations, speech to text, typing, and a lot of parents sometimes don't like that because they really want their kids to be able to write. And I get it. As a parent, I want my kid to, it seems like such a basic skill that you want your child to have. But if it's causing them frustration in the classroom, if they're avoiding their work because they don't want to write, it's not really helping them in the school setting. So that's
you're right. I mean, I think there's a big piece to the student motivation there.
Yes.
I think when you get to speech, the equivalent of that in speech therapy to me is those later developing sounds, like the R or the TH, and it's not impacting other people's ability to understand them, but if the student themselves feels self-conscious and that's affecting their desire to participate, now we've got an educational need, right? An educational impact. So every student, I feel like we can't necessarily say they could work on this or not work on this. Every single student, we've got to just look at it individually. Is there an educational impact or is there not? I had a case I advocated on that was all about a lot of things, but handwriting and fine motor was a big part of it. And they were in second grade. And so I really felt like they had been found previously eligible. And it was kind of this time where it's we're going to work on this now. Or like you said, I said to the mom, this is probably going to be something that they're going to just push to accommodate. And that had already been in a 504 plan, all this speech to text things. But also you got to look at the data and come back and go, I was so did it work? What data do you have to show me? What's the last writing sample he did with this speech to text software versus the writing sample he did handwriting? And nobody had anything. So, if you're going to put the accommodation in place, they got to get trained on it. And especially if they're 7, you've got to encourage them, sometimes help them log into it to use it, learning that either speech to text or like word predicting software is like a whole nother skill in of itself as well,
And
right?
editing it after is what I've found kids struggle with. Like they do produce more written work by using speech to text, but then we have to go back and edit, and that's where I see students struggle also, is
Because
knowing
they're like,
how to
I'm
go
done,
back.
done,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about the difference between early intervention OT and school OT. How about like being an outpatient pediatric OT versus a school OT? What those scope of practices look like? What overlaps and what doesn't?
Sensory stuff, right? Sometimes we can give parents suggestions that, like we do a sensory profile, whether in the school or in the clinic or early intervention. We come up with a sensory profile and figure out like what is impacting the child's sensory system, which sensory systems are being impacted, and how is that affecting their behavior or their being able to complete a task all day. So sometimes some of that can carry over, and I can tell the parents, I see that this child needs a lot of movement. So, if you can get them to, get them to the park, before you sit down for dinner or something like that, that you can also kind of translate that over to the school and ask maybe the teachers in daycare or even in the schools and say, hey, could this student maybe have some time in the sensory room if the school has one,
Yeah.
Before
I think,
they have to
do you
sit
ever
down.
think that the school team gets like a little annoyed with outpatient therapists who like give suggestions and then the parents are like, their outpatient therapist said da da da. And like
Yes.
we were those people and then we became the school people and I see from both sides how it's like, oh man, we don't have a swing here. like,
Yes, yes, and I have
like
to. Oh gosh, I wish every school had a sensory room, and they just don't, and it's hard, and
yeah.
it's hard to
There's a
provide the
little
student.
bit of the like I think that like you want there to be collaboration. I think in the best circumstances there is great collaboration. Um, Sometimes I think the best collaboration happens when like both therapists have actually done both settings because you really do understand then like what's it like on the other side. Whereas sometimes therapists who've only been an outpatient, I think, have like a little bit of rose-colored glasses of like what the school could really be like or provide. And this is unfiltered IEP, so we're going to be here to tell you the real, like a lot of those things they're suggesting are wonderful ideas, and I'm an advocate, so I'm like, let's try. Yes, let's. If it works for that student, let's get it in the IEP. But the real is that you're gonna probably get pushback
Yeah.
because it is going to take, if it's gonna take extra staff or equipment that has to be purchased to like do that thing. Um, the question is always going to be like, is it necessary? Not is it beneficial? Right? Because what we get to ask in the occupational in the outpatient setting is it beneficial? What we have asked in school is it necessary?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of back and forth there. And I get it because also as a school therapist, like you said, you're not getting the same amount of respect. That's something that I want to like bring more awareness to. And I was talking about on a podcast recently, like trying to help parents understand, like we all have the same degree. Like whether we're working in this setting or working in that setting, like I have the utmost respect for the other school therapists that are there. They're not less therapists because they work in schools, but there is that impression for some parents. And I think it comes from the fact that I think it's a couple things. I think it comes from the fact that they get to communicate with them less. So they just don't have that personal connection. They don't even know, like, they're not seeing how much that school therapist knows because they're just not having those face-to-face interactions as often. And then they see them as part of the school team that is not cooperating or, whatever the impression is, like that they're not listening, which is sometimes true, or that they're not working with us, that they just keep stonewalling us. And we have this dynamic that plays out so much. And that's a big part of why I want to have this podcast, because I'm like, we got to break down these walls a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to read something I found on OT Reddit, and from a school OT and their experience, and see what you think about it compared to your experience in terms of like number of sites they were at, caseload, those kind of things. Tell me if you think this is typical. I was a contract OT in the school setting for almost 20 years and absolutely loved the hours and flexibility. I was responsible for anywhere from 5 to 8 campuses per school year, depending on how many kiddos were on each campus on OT. I was responsible for all of the ARDs and evals on those campuses, as well as collaborating with the teams for IEPs, etc. My actual caseload varied from 75 to 135 students per school year. I did do ESY for my earlier years. It can be a challenging setting which requires a lot of self-organization and being able to bend and flex, because a lot of your job will be communicating and working closely with others rather than doing your own thing. Best years of my OT career. What are your thoughts on that? Does that sound right to you, like in terms of like caseload, setting, sites?
Yes. My experience as a school OT is caseloads can be very, very high. I never reached 100, I don't think. I think the highest I got to was maybe 80, around 80. But it's so difficult going, you as an OT, or as any therapist, you really you didn't come into this job to write reports and go from one school to the other, and you spend so much time doing that when you have such a big caseload, and then your therapy falls to the side. The
reports have to get done, and then also if you have a coda, which I think a lot of parents don't always realize, that a lot of times the codas are the ones providing the therapy in the school, and the OTs are like run ragged doing a million reports.
Yes. And also, I have to advocate for having codas too, because as a therapist, I was in the school district, and I was thinking, why don't we have more codas to do? Because then as a therapist who was in a school district that didn't have any codas, all of the OTs were worn pretty thin. Like, we all had 80-ish students, and we couldn't cover for each other. You can't.
That last district didn't do codas?
No. Wow. No, I didn't have a coda at all. And I had such a heavy load of IEPs. This district, actually not the last district I was at, but the one prior to that, where I only stayed for like a month and a half. I don't even think I was there for 2 months, because I had such a heavy caseload. And I had, let's see, in 1 month, I had, I think, 20 IEPs. And so that was several, and not just IEPs, but triennials. I had initial evals, and so, that is a whole other bag, because you have to do all this testing, and if the student's not there, if the student is not cooperating, if it's a student that needs the assessment to be broken down in smaller chunks, it takes up so much time. And then you can't see, there's just so many hours especially in the school day. And then you have days, your early release days.
Can't pull them from math. Can't pull them from,
Yes, and I was trying to put together my my schedule and talking to teachers and trying to figure out when the best time was. You can't pull them from specials. You can't pull them from PE. You can't pull them from recess. You can't, and then it's like, well, what's left? And then, okay, well, can I pull them at this time? Well, no, because they are struggling in math and they can't be pulled at that time. Well, now these 2 students are available at this time, but they're not a good fit to do in a group setting, and so it's just...
Preach, Gail. This is what we need to hear. This is what it's really like.
Yes, and it's so difficult. And then, I was a contract OT. I was covering a maternity leave. Actually, I seem to be doing that a lot. Every time I was working in a school district, I was covering
Yeah.
a maternity leave. And so I was, you know, taking somebody else's caseload. And it was so hard because, you know, I was they haven't established that relationship with me with with the teachers because I wasn't there the previous year, so they weren't as super accommodating with what I needed as a therapist. And so, you know, and then also the paperwork that comes with those IEPs and all the assessments,
Playing
they
catch up.
don't they it was hard to catch up. I had to work sometimes until 9 o'clock at night unpaid, and I know teachers, preaching to the choir to teachers, but as a contractor, I'm not getting paid a salary. I'm getting paid hourly, and you know the company that I worked for said, nope, you can't charge for that. It's not billable. So I was working for free, but you can't go to an IEP and not have a
And not be
report.
prepared. Right. And then going back to what you were saying, like not having the relationship with the teachers, I mean, a lot of OTs in schools are contractors. A lot of OTs are not district direct hires. And that could be like a whole episode of like why our fields are like really different in that way. But I think that makes it hard sometimes for OTs who are contractors to establish that relationship and that trust, because also the teachers have had previous experiences, and to them, you know, having been in, we also worked in the same school district, not at the same time, and we'll get to that, but like having been in that district where it was a revolving door of many people for very legitimate reasons, the people who have been there a long time, the teachers who have been there a long time were like, oh, another one, like, right? It was like, oh, okay, here comes another therapist. They'll be gone in 6 months. Like, so they're a little bit burnt out on us being in there, being contractors, and it makes it even harder.
Yeah.
So this person loved her 5 to 8 sites, 75 to 135 students. That's incredible. I mean, good for them. I mean, maybe, and we don't know. Caseload is not workload, right? So maybe a bunch of these students had 15 minutes a month consult. You know what I mean? But that's still a mountain of paperwork.
Yes.
That's an unbelievable amount of paperwork. And she loved it. Too bad Reddit's anonymous. I would love to have that person on. After your school experiences, would you ever go back? What do you think? Like, or maybe the next question is not would you ever go back, but in the next couple years, would you want to go back?
It would highly, highly depend on the district and the school.
Yeah.
Because the last district I was at, I loved the district. And I loved one of the schools that I was at. The other school I was at, not at all.
They were telling me that very different cultures. Same district.
Very, very different. And the demographics of one of the schools was a lot more demanding.
Litigious.
Yes, they were very litigious, and they the families just they didn't care that you were taking time away from other students. You know, they were families who had multiple meetings and would not come to a conclusion, you know, not come to an agreement, and we were having 3-4 meetings for the same student within like months, weeks of each other. And it was very hard to deal with because I had a lot of guilt, you know, not seeing my students. And it's like, oh no, and how do I make up this time? And, you know, and it's very, very difficult. Whereas on the other hand, you know, IEPs kind of gave me this anxiety, and the other school, in contrast, they were all easy. There was, you know, there were a couple families that are a little bit, you know, more challenging to deal with, but they did not give me the same anxiety as I had with this other school because, you know, because there weren't as many lawsuits involved and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And me being the person on the side of the table with the parents who know their rights and want what they think their students deserve. Like for me, I tend of course to like lean more on that. Like I've been in the school district that was not doing the right thing. We both have. And so when a parent tells me that the school is not following the IEP or taking their concerns seriously, I tend to believe the parents and take their concerns seriously because I've seen it for myself, what it can look like on the inside when those things aren't being done. Yeah. Let's switch gears for a second and talk about what it's been like for you as a parent being on the other side of the table. Being not just in IEP meetings, we can talk a little bit about IEP meetings, but then I'm also curious of what's the difference when it's a 504 meeting, because you have two children who have different types of plans. And for our listeners who aren't super familiar with that, would you break it down for us real quick?
Yeah, so a 504 plan is kind of, I don't want to say a watered down IEP, but it's focusing more on accommodations.
It's just accommodations,
It's
right?
just
No
accommodations.
services.
They're not getting any services. They're not getting speech or OT or anything like that. We're just coming up with accommodations to help the student, in my case, my daughter, to be able to focus in the classroom, complete her work, give her, so her accommodations are things like having extra time to complete an assignment because she has a hard time with getting her work done in time because of ADHD. I made sure I wrote it into her 504 that she's allowed to chew gum because we have seen that chewing gum can fulfill that oral sensory need to help students focus. And some teachers still do not like students chewing gum. And so I've had, actually at my last 504 meeting for my daughter, that was in there, and the assistant principal said, "Oh, we don't monitor gum chewing. That's fine. We don't really have to have this here." I said, "Nope, keep it in," because she has had teachers try to get her to spit it out. And she knows I have it in my 504. I can chew gum. As long as they're respectful of it, they're not sticking it all over the desk or, anything like that. Like she should be allowed to do that. And I love that there are teachers who are a little bit more on top of learning, keeping on top of these new studies that show that, sensory regulation helps learning. I've been in schools where the teacher will actually provide a whole jar of mints, and because she knows that helps students to focus. But there are still, teachers who are a little bit more old school, don't want kids eating candy, don't want kids chewing gum, don't want fidgets, so those are all things that I wrote into her 504 to make sure that she is allowed to have those things, because otherwise she just has such a hard time focusing in the classroom. Now on the IEP side, you do get services.
So the main difference, I'm just going to jump in for a second, is
Sure.
Does the student need services, related services, speech services, specialized academic services, occupational therapy services, and are like modifications to the curriculum? If the student is in general education and does not need any specialized instruction, but they have a known disability that requires accommodations, ADHD being one of them. It could also be a physical disability, like the student could be a wheelchair user. Then a 504 plan is more appropriate, and these come from two different laws, the Rehabilitation Act being one of them, and IDEA being the one that supports IEPs. And your son got an IEP a little bit at a later age. Do you mind sharing? How old was he? 13?
So he wasn't diagnosed until, let's see, it was 2020 because it was during COVID.
Right.
So he was 11 by the time he got his diagnosis, and I really tried to push for that diagnosis before he got to middle school because I just knew that making that transition to middle school, having multiple classes, that was going to be really hard. And I knew he was going to really need some support. And so,
And diagnosis of autism, right?
of
We're okay to
autism,
say
yes.
that?
And he did have an earlier diagnosis of ADHD as well. So he has both of those diagnoses. And the IEP, so he actually, as far as services go, he really only has speech, but it was very tricky because if I didn't have the background that I have and knew exactly what to point out, he might not have gotten those services. So I've really had to be an advocate for him myself because, he can talk. Assessment, every standardized assessment, he could fly through. And so I had to say, look at his pragmatics. And the SLP at the time said, okay, let me do this. I'm just going to have a conversation with him. And then that's when she saw it, because she saw that conversations with him are very one-sided. He doesn't give anyone else a turn. And so we had to come up with a way to relate that to his education. Well, we decided that that was going to impact him when he's having debates in the classroom, when he's understanding other students' perspectives, when they're doing group projects or things like that.
And just socialization. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to necessarily be academics, but the socialization aspect. I'm going to pause for...
Yes. So we had to get a little creative and figure out how he could get speech, and he's had it. He's had speech since 6th grade.
Yeah.
So he's about to enter his junior year in high school. So he still has speech. He hasn't
And accommodations, which is
and accommodations.
a big, like it was, there's some accommodations, right, for like work completion and right? Because he is working on checking in with his teacher, and that self-advocacy, I know you were saying, is like a big part.
Yeah, so the advocacy part.
On.
Oh, that's one thing that they're working on in speech also, is him advocating for himself, because even though he has all these accommodations, teachers don't always remember to adhere to them.
Yeah.
And especially certain teachers will do things like my daughter and my son actually had the same teacher as a history teacher at their middle school, where students have X amount of extra time to do their work or to complete their work. Well, she just went ahead and said, well, typically this assignment would get 3 days allotted to them, so I'm just going to make a blanket statement that everybody gets 5 days. Well, that's very confusing for the students who have 504s or any, accommodations, because they're like, well, do I get the extra time?
Yeah.
And she says, nope, this is your cutoff. I'm already giving everybody the 2 extra days or whatever it is. And I don't think that's right. Because, like I said,
the word extra is in there for a reason.
Yes. And, she has dinged them points, and she has, yeah, so teaching the kids to advocate for their needs, and getting their accommodations as they're entitled to, it can be tricky. They don't want to go up and ask the teacher. They don't want to stand out. They don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to be a bother. They don't want any retaliation from the teacher,
That too.
And I think that's a big one, especially for my daughter who gets very anxious,
Yeah.
And so,
now, can I ask, do either of them attend their own meetings now, or is it something that you've considered?
Yes, they do. With my son, we tend to start the IEP meetings without him, and then he gets pulled in towards the end, especially for a triennial. He'll get pulled in towards the end, the second half or whatever, when we start to talk about goals and things like that. He'll get pulled in for that, because he should know what his goals are, and he should know, if he thinks those are appropriate for him. He should be able to contribute to that. So they actually encouraged him to start joining. I believe it was in 8th grade.
Great.
that they started encouraging him to join the meetings. We did ask my daughter to join us for her 504 meeting, and she didn't want to because she would be missing ASB, and that was her favorite class. So she didn't want to be part of it.
What's ASB?
ASB is Associated Student Body or something like that. It's
Oh, right. She's in student council.
yeah, so she, she makes all the posters, she plans all the dances, all that kind of fun stuff. So she didn't want to miss that class. So
okay, well,
she's
there
like,
you go.
Whatever you think is
She
fine.
advocated for herself that she didn't want to go. No
Yes.
thanks.
Yes.
I have kind of a fun little Price is Right kind of game I'm going to
Sure.
play with each guest. And so it's just a simple over-under. Over or under, Gail, do you think more or less than 9% of students receive special education in California, the year of the statistic being 2017?
Oh. I would say less. Under.
Really?
I think so.
It is over.
Oh.
Yes, 12.5% of California public school students received special education. This is coming out of the LAO. I'll link it in the show notes because I like to cite my sources. But yeah, and that I would say is average to low, and I think it's probably only going up.
Yeah.
The district that we used to work for was like around 20%.
Wow.
Isn't that? Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Yeah, so you were thinking less. I think that reflects the OT experience because it's such a small population
Yes.
of like each school probably that you see the kids at. But let me tell you, a bunch of them are speech, language impairment eligibility kids, which we case manage. You didn't have to case manage. I do get
No.
salty about that.
And I am very
OTs
grateful
do
for
not
that.
have to case manage because that's a whole another responsibility of sending out the meeting notices and making sure the IEPs are calendared on time and all of that. If there's anything you could change about being a school SLP, what would you change?
You mean OT? A school
Yes.
OT?
Let's restate that. If there's anything you could change about being a school OT, what would you change?
Oh gosh, so many things.
Get one.
Pick one. Oh, let's see. Make OT a standalone service. Because there are, for people who don't know, OT is not a standalone service, meaning if a student doesn't qualify under speech or specialized academic instruction, is there anything else? Just those two?
Autism, OHI, it could be any of them.
If the student doesn't qualify for any of those, they can't get OT. And I haven't come across too many actually, but I'm sure there has to be some kids that maybe have some sensory needs and, but they couldn't get OT because if they don't qualify. Yeah.
It's not a standalone service, rather. It's
No.
only a related service. I actually had a team this year say that they did not include occupational therapy in the initial assessment because it's a related service. So they wanted to make sure the student was found eligible in other areas first and that they would then do it after. And I was like, that's not, you don't have to do it like that.
Yeah.
OT can be part of a multidisciplinary initial assessment. It doesn't need to happen after they've already qualified for something else. And I think to get a holistic picture of the child, you should have included it if that's what the parent asked for. Yeah, we made that pretty well known that was not okay. But I think that related service thing is something that I will say I've seen administrators kind of use to deflect of like, well, and like also it seems to be this refrain that parents hear and they repeat back to me, well, they say it's so hard to get OT. They just say it's so hard, so we shouldn't even try. It's just so hard. And I'm like, if you have concerns like your child already has a medical diagnosis of autism and you want them to look at an eligibility of autism, OT should absolutely be part of that assessment. But they're not always getting pulled into it. Anyway, I
Yeah.
could go on all day about the autism eligibility thing. That's a whole episode. That's a whole episode. Um, I have another little segment.
Mm-hmm.
And, I might space these out better next time, but it's first episode, guys. Wrong answers only.
All right.
What is one skill every kindergartner needs to master? One fine motor skill.
Wrong answers only.
Mm-hmm. Wrong answers only.
Having a tripod grasp.
Hmm.
A lot of teachers and a lot of parents are very concerned that their kid is not holding the pencil the right way. But first of all, the tripod grasp typically develops between 4 and 6 years old. So they might just not have developed it yet by kindergarten. And we already know that we are pushing our kindergartners a lot
Really
harder
hard.
than we used to.
Yeah.
So there's that. And also, sometimes forcing a kid to have that grasp before they're ready can actually cause them to have a funkier grasp later on, and then it's harder to fix. But also, I tell parents, and I've moved away from writing tripod grasp, unless if they truly have a tripod grasp, in the IEP. What is it called? Present levels. Sometimes I will, be more specific about their grasp, but a lot of times I would just write functional grasp. They write with a functional grasp. Because even if it's not a tripod grasp, if they can write legibly, if it's not causing them pain, if they're able to, if it's not causing them to write too slowly and they're able to keep up, then whatever grasp is comfortable for them, I let them have it because, again, once they get a little bit older, I might give them like a pencil grip or something like that, or as much as possible.
Break the crayons? They say break the crayons.
Yep. Have a shortened pencil. I have a lot of golf pencils, shortened crayons. But also, I just try to let them develop naturally through play. And that's what I try to tell parents too, is just, whether it's early intervention or whatever setting, just let your kids play with their hands more. We have so many kids that are just swiping and tapping.
So right.
And they're not playing anymore. They're not hanging on monkey bars, so their fingers are not as strong. They're not getting that workout. I have parents who are afraid of Play-Doh and won't let their kids play with Play-Doh because they don't want it getting stuck on things. And so, everybody has
The
their
messiness,
boundaries.
the messiness factor is sometimes preventing us from having those fine motor and sensory experiences, right?
Exactly.
Okay, I got another one for you. I love that explanation, though. That was just a whole masterclass in and of itself. Wrong answers only. What is the best way to help a sensory seeker regulate?
The 1, 2, 3, eyes on me, quiet body. That doesn't work.
She said it.
It does not work.
Gail, super quick, if people don't know, what is a sensory seeker? I know that's a very hard thing to explain quickly.
Oh, God. It's,
there's a spectrum of sensory,
yes,
right?
It's a spectrum. We all have buckets, right? We all have our sensory buckets, and they're all filled at different levels. So some of us might be avoiders, where our bucket is almost full. We can only tolerate so much. Some of us have less in our bucket, and we might need a lot more before we're regulated.
Input, yeah.
So the seekers have their bucket less full, and they need, maybe more in their movement bucket, or they need more in their visual bucket. So we have our kids that, do this in front of their eyes.
Visual STEM, yep.
Yep. And so, so those are our sensory seekers. I could go into
and just
all
using
of that.
behavioral strategies and saying 1, 2, 3, eyes on me it's not going to work.
That's not going to work.
You don't say. Number 3, last one, wrong answers only. What does every school OT love about their job?
Oh, gosh. Well, I think we already talked about this. The paperwork and the large caseloads going to every school in the district. I did welcome the break sometimes. And, I liked having a little break of driving in between schools, but not every day and not with so many it just gets hard to fill.
So if you were to explain to a parent, or anybody who's not an OT, who sits in a different seat at the IEP table, like 3 things you would want them to know about your job that maybe people just don't realize, what would they be?
Let's see. One, I'm not a handwriting teacher. So again, people get so hung up on handwriting, but we are not handwriting teachers. And, I want what's best for your student. And so if the goal that you want to meet is out of their reach or just not realistic or not beneficial, I'm going to tell you, we might need to tweak that goal a little bit, or we might need to look at it from a different angle. And the third one, it takes a village to teach a student, just like it takes a village to raise a child. We all approach things from different angles and different perspectives as different professions, and what might seem like a silly goal that OTs come up with, like we come up with some funny ones, like I've had parents push back on a goal where I wanted a student to be able to color in the lines. And they're like, well, what does that have to do with school? Well, one, in kindergarten, they're going to have some coloring projects, but also we're working on fine motor, we're working on visual motor, we're working on spatial awareness when we're coloring. And so, OTs are masters at task analysis. And so we have to adjust that for the age of the student that we're working with. And so it might seem silly, it might,
The foundational skills behind it are what we're working on, and this is just one way to measure the data.
Yes, yeah. So if a student is not really, wanting to write, but they might color, that's something that, I'm going to adjust it to what their interests are and how they can actually meet their goals.
I love that. You want what's best for their child.
Yes. I'm not here to fight with you.
Yep. And sometimes we disagree, but I hope by everybody hearing from different perspectives, we can understand each other better and start to have more collaborative, more open IEP meetings.
Yes, I hope so.
Is there anything else you want to share with the audience? Just any last minute thoughts? If you want them to follow you?
Yeah, let's see. I haven't done a whole lot on it lately. I just posted for the first time in, I don't know, maybe a year or two. But I am on Instagram. I used to be the Crafty Coda. Now I'm the Crafty OTR to reflect my educational journey. But I'm on there on Instagram.
Gail is on Instagram at _crafty_OTR. You can follow her there. Gail, thank you so much for being on today. I so appreciate you being my first guest.
Oh, thank you. I always love these.
It's the best. It's the best. You'll be a friend of the pod. I'm sure we'll have you back on.
Yes.
You've been listening to Unfiltered IEPs. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow or subscribe to the podcast, rate and review to help others find the podcast, and connect with me on social media at theadvocate.slp on Instagram. And if you want to keep the conversation going, share this episode with a friend. Thanks for listening.